Can, all right, yeah, I'll do that. Doing the live. Okay, we're live, guys. We're live. All right, guys. Good evening. Good evening. How are you? My name is Jahida Lopez, one of the founding members of the South End Roxbury Community Partnership. And tonight we have a candidate, mayoral candidate, John Barros, who's joining us to have a conversation with everyday community members of all political affiliations to talk about his thoughts and what he can do to help remedy the situation that's happening on Mass and Cass. So I'm not sure if any other members from the South End Roxbury Community Partnership want to introduce yourself to John Barros and his team. And then once our members introduce yourselves, John and Joshua, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you. Stephanie, you want to go?
Hi, John and Joshua. Nice to meet you. My name is Stephanie Rodriguez-Ruiz, and I'm a Hyde Park resident. I'm also an education attorney.
Hi, John. It's nice to meet you guys. My name is Isaiah Garcia. I'm part of the Roxbury Community Partnership. I grew up in the South End area. I reside in Randolph right now.
Hi, I'm Marla Smith, also a member of the South End Roxbury Community Partnership. I actually live right in Roxbury near Clifford Playground. And it's nice to see you guys. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us tonight.
I think Isabel, you
Hi.
there?
Yep. Hi, this is Isabel. I am.
That's true.
We hear you, Isa.
And she's,
I'm so sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yep.
we hear you now.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I'm just about to meet my grandbaby. So, yeah, I am a student activist, and I'm here fighting with C. Roxbury because we need change in this world. So please help us.
Right. I don't know, between Domingos is coming in. Everybody knows Domingos, y'all. So I don't know if Domingos, you hear us?
what's up, Mingos?
You want to introduce yourself, Mingos?
You're on mute, man. You're on mute. There you go.
What up, folks? What's the deal?
So,
Domingos DeRosa.
all right. So I don't know,
Community.
Joshua, between Joshua and John, which one of you guys want to introduce yourselves to the community that may not know who you guys are and the role that you're playing in this meeting tonight?
Yep, definitely. Joshua McFadden, Deputy Campaign Manager for the Barros for Mayor team, Roxbury resident as well.
Roxbury in the house.
Thanks, Joshua. So yeah, thanks for getting on with me tonight so we could talk about the issues. John Barros, born and raised in Roxbury. Marla, I think we were neighbors for a while because I was born and raised on Clarence Street, right there, right off of Clifford. Sorry if I made noise in your front door when I was younger, but now I live up the street on off of Dudley on Virginia Street with my wife and 4 kids. What happens in Boston to people is my concern and why I'm running for mayor. I always feel like Boston has a lot to offer, but not everybody gets access to the same opportunities. We fought hard at the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative to try to improve our neighborhood. But we also knew that if the neighborhood was going to improve, is because the people who live in that neighborhood are going to play a leadership role in trying to improve it. For me, that's an important part of change. Change needs to happen because the people are going to push for it, and government needs to partner with people to make change happen that makes sense. So that's how I've lived out my professional life as executive director of Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative. That's why I opened up a business in the Bowdoin Street area as a restaurant owner on Bowdoin Street when Bowdoin Street was at one of its hottest crime areas in Boston. Just trying to bring something positive to Bowdoin Street, trying to bring some place where people can sit down, have a meal, listen to some music, get a job, and then education for me has been really important. So beyond doing the affordable housing, trying to improve parks, playgrounds, and urban farming at DSNI, we did a lot of work on education reform. And so having a good education or a way to get a good job by having workforce development and training is critical. And for many people in our neighborhood, having an English as a second language class was critical. So those kinds of human development classes are super important. And then I jumped in the race for mayor in 2013, as many of you knew or know. And then I joined the Walsh administration as chief of economic development to try to implement some of the things that I wanted to implement in the city. We got some things done, but there's still a lot of things left undone. And that's why at this point, I want to run for mayor and push some of those ideas and push some of those things.
For sure. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. And currently, as your role before you run for mayor, what is it that you do for the city of Boston currently?
Yeah, so right before I jumped in to run for mayor, I was the chief of economic development for the city of Boston. So really the job for me was to help push for a smarter economic development approach.
Yep.
I went to the city holding the value that we can, in fact, build a city without displacing our neighbors. So I pushed for, affordable housing, worked really closely with Sheila Dillon, try to push for better jobs, because that's the other half of affordable housing. One is to create affordability and access. The other is to get people more money and better jobs, right? And so economic development for me is an important part of that equation. Helped to push for more than 140,000 new jobs in Boston. And then we dropped unemployment in all neighborhoods to record lows. And when we did that, then we started a program called Boston Hires so that we can move people from the jobs they had to better jobs. Before I left City Hall, we had moved 15,000 Bostonians to better jobs in Boston, and proud of that. Now, clearly, the pandemic hit us hard. So when the pandemic hit, a lot of people around us lost jobs. We still have parts of our economy that are still not back up, particularly the hospitality economy, hotels, still restaurants that are struggling. I think still about 20% of the small businesses in the restaurant space are still closed. That's a lot of jobs, and so we've got to get back on and get people back to work.
So thank you for that answer. So kind of like the first question that we have in the queue is to kind of go back to the work that you were doing in that space. So one of the questions we have is, in your role as the chief or prior, because I'm assuming because you're running as a mayor, you can't work in the city. I don't know, just because I'm still learning. So are you currently working as a chief or not?
So I could have run as chief, but it would be a conflict, right? I would need to do my job, and then after I do my job, run for mayor, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me to run for mayor and be chief of economic development. I'm not going to talk about whether that's fair or not fair, et cetera, because some people get to keep their paychecks and their jobs, but that's what it is. And I'm fine with that. Right. And so I'm out here, trying to, so I don't have a job right now. I'm full time trying to be a candidate because I'm serious about this. And I really think it's important.
I appreciate that. I really appreciate that answer. So the question we have is, in that role, when you served prior to running as a mayor, in that position, did you help improve the quality of life in the business and the economic things, because the businesses in that location are struggling. The hospitality in that location is struggling. As you know, there's a hotel there. When people come visit Boston, they get off the highway right there, right? Because it's the main connector. So while you served in that role, what have you done? Can you tell us what you have done to help support the quality of life in the economy in the area that is surrounding Methadone Mile, Mass and Cass, and the neighborhood surrounding that area, which is Roxbury, South Boston, and Dorchester?
Yeah, no, great questions. I think one of the more important work that I did as soon as I went into the city I went to the city with a public commitment that we were going to look at city procurement, meaning how much money the city does business with women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and local businesses versus businesses outside the city. Really just take a look at how the city's spending its what's called discretionary dollars. We knew that the city wasn't spending a lot with women-owned businesses. We knew that the city wasn't spending a lot with people of color-owned businesses. But we needed to make the case in a legal way. And so I did a legal study called a disparity study that looks at 5 years of data to look at, in fact, what was happening and how much money was being spent. After 5 years of collecting data and then doing a disparity study, we just finished a disparity study, and it showed us exactly what we already thought, that the city wasn't doing a lot of business with women-owned businesses and people of color-owned businesses. So that was the biggest thing. Which after that study, the mayor then signed an executive order that 25%, at least 25% of the money the city's going to spend is going to spend with women-owned businesses and people of color-owned businesses. That's about $180 million a year. It's a lot of money, but that's fair, right? If we're going to do it right, given the disparity we have, the number of businesses in Boston we have. And so for me, that is a big, big help for small businesses. Now we need to get back in there and make sure those small businesses have the help that they need to get to those contracts, and that we right-size the contracts for the small businesses. Because people always talk about how getting contracts from the city is a difficult process. We need to provide workshops, provide technical assistance to get them in there. Everything from translating our RFPs to making sure we have somebody that speaks a different language, to making sure that we're doing affirmative outreach to those businesses. All very important. That is some of the most important work I did. Now, that's not only it. I think, like I said before, when you think about homelessness, when you think about people who are down on their luck, who are looking for services, we've got to create more homes, more transitional homes, more affordable homes, and more supportive housing. And so that's some of the work that I really pushed at the city, and then push for good jobs. It's super important. So we spent a record number of money, not just building affordable housing, but actually spending money doing workforce development. So while I was there as Chief of Economic Development, we opened this office called Office of Financial Empowerment. The Office of Financial Empowerment, there's an office in Nubian Square. If you haven't checked it out and you're around the South End Roxbury area, you should go by. It does workshops on how you get jobs. It does workshops and training on how you manage your money. It does workshops and training on how you clean up your credit so that you can access more funds and more money, and things aren't so expensive for you. That's the kind of work we did while I was Chief of Economic Development. Super important. The piece I'll say real quickly is we then created a free community college program so that if you came out of BPS with at least a C+ and you were headed to a community college, we were going to try to figure out a way to make sure that it was free, so you can get your associate's degree for free. We think that the student debt issue is a real problem. Too many people are coming out of school with huge student debts, right? And can't even, and that's causing a lot of financial stress for our families. So that's a program that if I become mayor, I'm going to look to expand and make sure that more people can have access to it. Those are the kinds of things that I did as Chief of Economic Development. There's more. I could talk about the Boston jobs residency policy, but let me talk a little bit about how I supported the businesses in the New Market area, which I think was the original question.
Yeah, because it seems like, not to cut you off, but I think that when we're down there, like a lot of the businesses have expressed feeling like they're not supported financially. That many have also expressed that they are fined for not cleaning up the area for things that they wasn't the one discarded. So if they're not cleaning the feces and the clothes that a lot of people donate, the toiletries that people donate, we've gotten an earful from a lot of the businesses there that have told us, like, listen, they're fining us for not cleaning this area. So I think that there's a lot of concerns of like, how do we support the businesses in that area thrive and get more people to visit and do business, especially at the New Market Pizza, which is at the island. It's a Latina owned business. She's losing a lot of money. She's doing, she does a lot of deliveries because people are refusing to go inside the pizza shop. So we kind of want to hear more how can we support the businesses in that area who are losing revenue, even including Home Depot, Stop and Shop, because they want individuals from Methadone Mile, Mass and Cass, literally walk in, serve themselves a salad at the salad bar, and walk out and not having to pay. And a lot of the security officers are kind of like, we can't do anything. So can you talk to us how we can help them survive and not lose businesses and maintain in our community to help us, with the revenue?
No, that's absolutely right. I know a lot of those business owners well. I just, in fact, just met with them 2 weeks ago. We walked the streets. And I know you guys, know Doris, right, at Food Pack, who was at the heart of it. And she's losing millions of dollars every year. And you're the one, you were right. I think she got fined a couple of times, right, for stuff that she can't control. And you know the situation down there. And so we walked in and talked about, I've got a really close relationship with the businesses in the New Market business area, closer with some more than others, worked with Sue Sullivan really closely. I first worked with them closely as executive director of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative. We were a member. I was a member of the New Market Business Association. And then as chief of economic development, worked with them on their bid creation. I think you guys know they're trying to create a bid to try to, as businesses, partner with the city so they can deliver some of the services that they think needed, to clean the streets and do some things like that. And so help to move that along as chief of economic development, still supported as a candidate. I think that we should move that on as quick as possible. Bill at, all time at Sunoco, trying to help to make sure that there's police presence. I mean, he's got a hard time. You can't get in his business some nights because there's too many people in front of his business. It's just ridiculous. And so working with the businesses to try to make sure that it's a safer, cleaner place is super important, but also starting the bid is critical. But I think the biggest thing we can do for the businesses is make sure we decentralize the services in that area. Because right now there's way too many people looking for services in that area. It's all there. We don't even have the complete suite of services there. But there's too much there right now to begin with, and the people are spilling out in the streets, and we shouldn't have that kind of stuff.
Thank you for that. So I know that to that conversation, we get this all the time because we get positive feedback. Sometimes we get negative feedback. So one of the biggest topics that we hear all the time when we're meeting with candidates like yourself and, those that served in the seats as city councilors, how would you prioritize Boston residents to gain access to substance use and homelessness treatment facilities? Because we get that all the time. A lot of people know the majority of the individuals on Mass and Cass, Methadone Mile, are not from Boston. They're coming from oftentimes white suburbia, right? Things that individuals do not want to see in their community, but they want to dump Boston because it seems like Boston has become the dumping ground of what white suburbia does not want to deal with in their community. So one of the biggest questions that we get all the time is, how are you going to prioritize to ensure that Boston residents are a priority in getting access to those treatment beds, in addition to housing opportunities? Because even though we have individuals on Mass and Cass that are homeless, we also have a lot of our family members that are in current shelters waiting to get Section 8 subsidized housing. So, in your role, how will you prioritize and ensure that Boston residents got first dibs, basically?
Yeah, no, it's and as some of the folks on the streets, it's hard to figure out their last address, right? But what we did find when we looked at and surveyed people, 67% to 72%, depending on which night you were going to, people were from outside the city. Their original addresses, anyways, were from outside the city. And so you're right. It's a big problem. The thing that I did at the city as chief of economic development is I actually did a lot of work with other cities and towns in the region. And the first thing we need to do is work with the other towns around us, work with the suburban towns, the other urban towns around us to make sure that there is a coordinated system so people can get assistance, so the people from their towns can find assistance. Now we need the state to step up with some of the services and no longer, first of all, we can't get another, we've got the area's methadone clinics. We got to stop that, right? We got to make sure that we're distributing services to other places in the area equally. So the state's got to be at the table too to make sure that we've got an agreement on how we're going to do this. Then we need to get agreement with people. If you go down there really early in the morning, there are these white vans that show up and drop people off. We can't have that. That's a conversation with those cities and towns that they can't just come in and drop people off on mass and cast and expect us to provide services. So all of that's got to stop as we try to figure out how to provide better housing and better services for our residents. Here are I think the top 4 things we've got to provide. We have to build more transitional supportive housing for the homeless and wrap around them. Then we need more beds for both mental health and recovery, and not just one on its own, right? Not just recovery, because what we're finding is people need both together, and there aren't enough beds with both. And so we need to increase the number of beds with both. And then we need to make sure that we are taking care of people who, in fact, need to re-enter better, right? Which is another population that's migrating over there that makes no sense. I mean, I talked to some folks at Suffolk County Jail, and they were saying, look, it's become too easy to get drugs. Yep. And so if it's too easy to get drugs, those of us who are trying to get our life back in order, we're tempted to go because I know A, I can get drugs, B, I can shoot up, and nobody's going to arrest me, right? So all of a sudden, I'm trying to kick a habit, right? But you got a place that's down the street from me where I can buy drugs and shoot up, and I know I'm not going to get arrested. It doesn't help anybody. And so we've got to change the conditions down there. People just can't shoot up, and there's no, nothing, no services, no intervention. So I've said in my plan that we need a 24-hour team down there with people that are going to go down and going to be like, what's your name? John Barros. What are you looking for? What kind of services? How can we help you? All right, come with me. You're coming this way, right? Oh, yeah, next day. Hey, John, you're back down here. Didn't we just talk about how you can get some services? What happened? Let me follow up with you. Oh, maybe you need something different. Let me take you to that. Right? So we need a 24-hour team that's going to make sure that we know people's names, know their cases, know what they need, and we're trying to bring them to that. Or else we're just going to have, once again, a place that people can shoot up, no problem, a place that people can buy and sell, no problem, and it helps nobody.
Say it again. I'm just saying, say it again, because we're constantly saying that because, and maybe Domingos can touch upon it a little bit, but we're seeing the individuals that are selling drugs on mass and cast are getting younger. And as we've seen recently, there was an incident where a young man, one was 16 years old, the other young man was 17 years old, had a gun, and they had drugs. So there is a big issue that if we're speaking on equity and we're speaking on supporting and ensuring that our Black and Brown community does not get impacted by the criminal justice system, we are creating a space for our Black and Brown babies to be the drug dealers on mass and cast. So, there's a huge issue that internally as a community we speak about it. Some of us don't feel comfortable speaking about it publicly, but the reality is the truth. If you see the record of most of the individuals that have been getting arrested on mass and cast, they are the Black and Brown community. So there's no equity in that if we're still creating spaces for our people to still be criminalized for selling drugs. Meanwhile, when there was a crack epidemic, our people were locked up, and many our babies are still impacted by the crack epidemic and the war on drugs, who navigated systems and may be on the mile now. So one of the biggest questions that we do have, and I would love for you to talk about it, is that we know that they're building a state-of-the-art engagement center in that location. Yep. So you can see, and some of you guys may follow us or not, but there's groups after groups after groups that are down there constantly donating toiletries, clothes, food. The question is, why is the engagement center, because it says engagement, Why is the engagement center not offering these basic tools, these basic necessities to engage people to actually get them into treatment? Because for us, you can't have a title of a service to call being called engagement center, but there's nothing engaged in this happening in there. So people who are unhoused and navigating addiction can't take a shower. They have nowhere to change their clothes. They don't have hot meals while they're being prescribed these heavy duty medication on empty stomachs, so they can't even eat. What do you think should be happening in this new state of the art engagement center that's being built?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is, I mean, you talked about it, right? There's just not it's not like a system there, right? You've got, at least right there, next to the engagement center, you've got the shelter, 486 bed shelter. And then you've got that little gated area with the tents and the porta potties, with people on the streets giving out water, giving out food, and trying to be helpful. It's not set up for that. It's just not set up for that. But yet it's not set up for like people to hang out, right? It's not set up for people to get food. It's not set up but yet we let people hang out there and without those services. And so I just want to say that's the first thing, right? If people are going to hang out there, if we're going to create a place, for people to go, then we've got to provide food. We got to provide water. We've got to provide all of the toiletries. We got to provide a place for them to take a bath. We got to provide a place for them to use the bathroom, right? I mean, sort of, we got to, during COVID, we shut down all the bathrooms. So it got really bad down there. And so we've either got to work with BMC, the library, and others to open up the bathrooms again and let people use it before the engagement center is built, right? So that we have some dignity and some sanity about how people can use the bathroom. And then we provide toiletries and other things. People can take showers and stuff. We've got to do it in a way where we're treating people with dignity, or we're moving people to a place where they can do that, right? But it can't be just, we allow people just to hang out. We leave it so they can do that, and we're not providing any of these things. So I agree with you 100%. We've got to create a system that treats people with dignity and respect, and that's providing those things. And if we can't do it there, let's figure out where we can do it immediately and move them there, because right now that situation is disrespectful and it's inhumane and it's just not fair.
Thank you. We appreciate that. So another one, and I think you kind of touched upon a little bit of this, but we're curious, there's a mass and cast task force. First of all, we have not been invited to the party. So hopefully under your leadership, we get invited to that party. We would love to be part of the mass and cast task force, just saying. But so currently there's a mass and cast task force that, first of all, there's barely any representation of Roxbury. Two, there is lack of representations of individuals who are in recovery that can help shape policy development on this issue. So what would you do if you get elected as a mayor? How would you help improve the Mass and Cast Task Force to, one, be fully transparent? Because when you go on the City of Boston website, you can't find access to the meeting minutes. You cannot find access to the dates so that individuals like ourselves can request to join a meeting, whether it's virtually at City Hall, we don't know. 2, 3, we do not know who is the chair or the co-chair of this Mass and Cast Task Force, which is also problematic. And, again, how can you help revamp or reshape or reimagine the Mass and Cast Task Force that really is truly inclusive to the community, and also making sure that those who have navigated addiction and have recovered, who can really help us push legislation and change, policies and city Boston charters on this issue? How can you help us, address that?
Yeah, no, you can do it day one. You don't need to change the charter on it. I think, the first thing that I've said in my plan that I'll do is I need to appoint someone that everybody knows who is in charge of the Mass and Cast Task Force. There shouldn't be any ambiguity on that, right? You should have access to that person, and they should be a senior level person in the administration. We can call it a, senior advisor, for health and for mental health and substance abuse disorder. You can call it a czar, right? For for the kind of work that we want to do there, but you should know who that person is, and that person should be accessible and transparent. And then you should also know who's on the Mass and Cast task force. And there is no reason to have a task force that doesn't have report backs or doesn't have like transparency in terms of minutes and what else is happening, and that doesn't engage the public, right? So you're talking about you're not part of it. We've got to make sure that we've got something that is engaging the public, because people have family down there, right? There's a Facebook group now of people who are trying to find their family members and trying to figure out where they are and trying to locate them and connect them. You know, people are trying to get engaged. And so we as the city need to make sure that our task force is an engagement process with the people that are out there. I think the other piece is we need more city capacity, right? So it can't just be, it's one person and a team. I think, you know, we need to declare it a public health emergency that allows the city to move resources immediately to that space, so that we can actually add to the people there. And I keep talking about the 24-hour outreach team of social workers, of healthcare workers, of people who can deal with substance abuse, of people who are trained to deal with mental health issues, to get out there and make sure that they're available, of new liaisons to the mayor's office of neighbor services for the residents that live nearby, who've got issues, maybe not on Mass and Cass, but like, you know, on Clifford, next to Clifford Park, on Norfolk Ave, right there, or you know, any of those other streets, George Street, Clifton Street. I mean, just keep calling them out. There are issues there, quality of life issues there that the city needs to have a special team that's dealing with that, right? That's on that. That's making sure that you know, things are getting cleaned and we're picking up needles, right? So let's talk about a little bit. You know, in my plan, I call for a 24-hour operations center that's picking up needles, that's making sure we're looking at vandalism. I'm not that far. Whenever I leave my car open, somebody goes through it, right? And so, you know, how do we make sure we are controlling who's roaming what streets and what's happening, right? So we've got to have a 24-hour operations team that's cleaning up and making sure that we know where people are going. You know, this has to be done in partnership with community. I mean, you know, the task force, you talk about it has to engage community, but there are also civic associations and neighborhood groups out there that we need to be talking to, and these liaisons need to be meeting with all the time, so we know what the quality of life issues are. So we can give people reports and information on what's being done and not being done.
I appreciate that, because, you know, since we are not a nonprofit and we're not kind of under a civic association, we find that since we're kind of like an ordinary group, that we're just kind of like speaking our mind on this issue, we're oftentimes, I guess, not invited to certain parties. So I really appreciate that you're saying be in community, because even though we're not a nonprofit and non-civic association, doesn't mean that, you know, we're not able to get civically engaged and we don't understand systems. So another question we have is, as you know, there's multiple nonprofits in that location providing a service.
Yeah.
I know that there are a lot of questions that we get from community members through a series, through the Facebook engagement, through our Facebook group, and the engagement that we get. A lot of people want to know how would you, as a mayor, start holding these nonprofits in that area accountable for the services that they're supposed to provide and render, especially if they're receiving any form of city-based funds, or are in partnership with the city of Boston to render these services? How would you hold them accountable to ensuring that data is that you're in your mayor's office, you have accurate data, not data that we were told by the Boston Care for the Homelessness program that there is a backlog on, you know, the overdoses and things like that from like 2018. We're in 2021. So how would you be working or holding these, nonprofits accountable for the services that they're supposed to render? And if they can't do the work, they need to kind of say, we can't do this work and we need help.
Yeah, so I started to talk about this a little bit earlier, right? I agree with you. We need to figure out who's out there and have them by name and understand what they're looking for, where they're going, what they got, what they didn't get as help. There are tons of services down there, right? And we just don't have a good sense. I even talked to a service provider that talked about they've got empty beds, right, for for services. And then I talked to somebody who needed a service and they said, there's not enough treatment, there's not enough service. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's just a huge disconnect, right? We got empty beds down the street and we've got people looking for services. So for me, we just don't have the coordination on the ground, right? So I know that there's like, you got 2 shelters, one for men, one for women. You got Paths. It's a one-stop shop thing for people who are looking for information on substance abuse treatment. You have the Women's Project, Women's Wellness Center. It's outpatient centers for women with substance abuse disorder. You got Men's Health and Recovery. That's another outpatient treatment center. You got Safe and Sound Recovery Center. It's a peer-led. That's a peer-led outpatient treatment. So you got A-Hope. You got behavioral health services. You got Boston Medical Center. You got so all of these services that are down there, and I'm not sure who's working with whom, right? And I know when I go down there and I ask about who has beds and who's seeing whom, like there's a huge disconnect, and I don't think that we're working as a system to address these issues. So I think the first thing is to create a table where everybody's talking, right? And that we're helping each other move to allow people to get to where they need to in a very coordinated way. Now, once again, I think there's too many services down there altogether. And we've got to figure out how we, decentralize. But even when we decentralize, we got to figure out how we're getting people to point A to point B and who's being seen, what's happening, whether they're being helped, and then whether they need something different than what they're getting now.
Yeah. And I appreciate that, because just to kind of, for us, we like to expand on decentralize, right? Because as we know, when we say decentralize, what happens is because other communities outside of Boston do not want to help us shoulder this humanitarian crisis, what happens is that when services are going to be decentralized, they move them from one impoverished, one low income community, one Black and brown community to another Black and brown community. So when we're speaking about decentralizing, we're saying, yo, no more in the Black and brown community. Can we start asking some of our white allies to jump in and help us aid the situation in your community? Because as you know, John, when you do research, a lot of the research around the safe injection sites, they're always placed in 1, low voter turnout communities, 2, low income communities, 3, Black and brown communities next to schools that are underperforming. So when we speak of decentralizing, can you expand on what do you mean by decentralizing? Because we don't want it kind of like what's happening now. The DTA office back in the days used to be down Dudley. There was a lot of crime in that area. Now the DTA office is going back down Dudley. We know that a lot of individuals that, some say the individuals on Mass and Cass do not have access to IDs, and we beg to differ with them, because a lot of the individuals down there do have Social Security benefits and they do get food stamps. And then there also is the Boston Clarity ID that they're issued as residents of Mass and Cass, because many of them tell us that they're residents of Mass and Cass. So that's considered their residency. And so there's that concern of you're moving the DTA office back down Dudley to Nubian Square. Now there's going to be a party that's going to follow this spot, right? It's going to follow the DTA.
Yeah.
And this is where the issues are problematic. So we're moving it from one community to another community to increase the crime and increase certain humanitarian issues in another community, but we're not putting this right in, in those communities. Can you expand on what decentralizing means to you?
Yeah, so in my plan, I call out, we need a task force on this. This needs to be a conversation that allows us to look at where we can all share the pain, right? This can't be, what you're talking about has been happening for years. When as executive director of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, part of what we tried to do was close down the disproportionate number of trash transfer stations in our neighborhood, right? We had the highest rate of asthma. It's called environmental injustice. We had many issues in our area, and so what we needed to do was shut down trash transfer stations and those that were operating illegally, and those that were operating in ways that they. So if you remember, maybe like 20, 25 years ago, we used to have all these trash transfer stations in our city, in our neighborhood, and it created all types of health issues in our neighborhood. And that kind of concentration of things is typically, as you said, low voter turnout neighborhood, low income neighborhood, and often people of color neighborhood. And it's not a good, but it's also about systemically being disenfranchised and disempowered neighborhoods. I have 4 sober homes on my street, right, which is up the street from where you're talking about, and there's a huge loophole in our zoning system because they can buy in our neighborhoods. They buy in our neighborhoods these big Victorian homes, and they put a lot of people in them, right? We finally caught up with the developer that was doing it, but it took us a while, right? And so this is something we need to do with the decentralization or relocation task force is what I'm calling it, to make sure that there are residents from different parts of the city who are sitting down. It's like, okay, who's getting what? Now, the place that I know for sure we should move some services is the Shattuck. In my mind, the Shattuck has to get some services. It's a campus that I think is appropriate for certain services, and we should move some there immediately.
But isn't the Shattuck moving down to the most overly populated part of the city, which is Methadone Miles? So the Shattuck is being moved down to that location in 2024. Which means that, as another counselor said, that every year Methadone Miles sees an increase of over 100 people every year that come into that location. So are you and your team discussing what's going to be the outcome when we add another service to that location? Is that 100 more people coming, and now we're going to start seeing 200, 300 more people? And what is the plan to that? Because I think a lot of us is like, another service down here, why down here?
Yeah, we have to put a moratorium on the services that are going to Mass and Cass, right? So we can't have more services. The Shattuck originally was talking about a swing space, so they would move it back. That's not even part of the conversation anymore, right? So we can't, as a city, we shouldn't have it, right? We should push back on the state and not have those services move down there. It's too much. It's not being coordinated well, and we need to make sure that, if anything, we're moving it back to the Shattuck.
All right, and I know that there is, there's 2 big questions that we have. One of them, do you support safe injection sites? Would you support safe injection sites here in the city of Boston?
So the only way I would support safe injection sites is if we actually had intervention programs tied to it, right? Because what's happening right now on Mass and Cass is just it's an undesignated safe injection site, right? You know you can shoot up, but nobody's talking to you about services. Nobody's going there and saying, hey, look, what's the next step? Those are the safe injection sites that have worked well in Canada or in Portugal and other places. They have to have a service that is helping you or is doing intervention so that when you're shooting up, you're just not going to come to shoot up, right? You're going to come, you're going to get some information. You're going to be told what services are available. You're going to be told like where you can go for some help. If we're not going to be able to do that, then let's just legalize it, right? And just let everybody shoot up, right? But I would only support it if it's in fact within a continuum of care for people to make sure. Because it would save some lives. It would save some lives, and it has saved lives. And you can't help somebody who's dead, right? But let's do it in a way that we can help them at the same time, so that we're not just setting up for long-term use.
And Mingos did have a good question. If so, how would we fund the safe injection sites?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that needs to be dealt with the state in terms of our healthcare system. So that's a very good question. Needs to be looked at in terms of how we would fund it. But I think the way that we need to look at it is not just how we fund a safe injection site. It's how we fund all the services around a safe injection site. They need to be linked. Let's not separate it. Let's make it part of a linked system, or else it doesn't work.
Good.
It needs to be part of recovery. It needs to be part of a bed somewhere. It needs to be part of a program somewhere that's already being funded, and we add on to it, not something by itself.
So I know that this is a huge topic, and I know it's July 5th, and as of July 1st, Rule 400 came into place. There were some changes in that. And we're curious to know, in your role as a mayor, get elected as a mayor, how do you plan to impact the rule of the 400 on the opioid crisis? Because as you know, that is the removal of Boston housing, special police officers. We have South Boston, we have Orchard Gardens, we have the Villa Victoria. We have a lot of those wing management. We have the Mandela building. We have a lot of housing developments in that area who will be impacted by the lack of special police officers, especially the community that's impacted the most regarding methadone mile. So can you tell us a little bit about how would you remedy this situation? Because I think a lot of people are scared of a lot of the things that are going to happen around Mass and Cass without the additional supports.
Yeah, this is a big problem. Of course, I think it was an oversight as they were doing police reform work at the state. But regardless, the state has to correct this ASAP. They need to make sure that we can, in fact, have the special police officers or the special security forces that we've had in the past that allow us to patrol some of these areas and provide some safety, teams in different places, whether it's BHA or, as you said, the different, Boston Public Health Commission, right? All of them, right? That nobody now can have any, and that's a big problem. The state's got to correct this ASAP. I'm not sure why they haven't done it yet. I'm perplexed.
Too, John, because in that when this was released was what, May 25th, which was when they had the a huge conference, which included DA Rollins, Kim Janey, the Boston Police Department, and in that plan it specifically stated that Marty Martinez is responsible and was supposed to put out there a civilian response plan. We are on July 5th, going on July 6th. So we're trying to figure out when that civilian response plan is supposed to drop, because, things are going to happen. And a lot of our viewers know that individuals who are on Mass and Cass, if you look at the research and you kind of look at the data, majority of the crime usually happens within the first week or two of the month, which means that those individuals who get their Social Security benefits are using their benefits, are engaging in drug activities, and it causes some drama down there. And for us, I just, and this is just my personal perspective. How do you give people Social Security benefits when they don't even have food and shelter to stabilize them? But then you're giving them a benefit that will help them get drugs, engage in some risky behavior, and nobody wants to talk about that. And I hope that your office kind of thinks about this in the future, because it's, one of the things that we talk a lot about but yeah, I mean, Rule 400 needs to be addressed.
Yeah, Rule 400 needs to be addressed immediately. And we, I know I was talking to somebody, I was talking to a reporter about it. I'm not sure why people aren't writing more about it. I'm not sure why people aren't addressing it publicly. I do think that we need to add a fourth emergency agency to the city of Boston, right? So I've said this publicly as part of how I would reform police, but it applies here too. But I don't think that is the response for Rule 400. But let me share this for you in terms of how I'm thinking about this. We do need more. We need a fourth agency. So when you call 911 right now, you either get the dispatcher either transfer you to BPD, Boston Fire, or EMS. It's the same system. We need to add a fourth that has social workers, mental health professionals, and substance abuse workers. so that if you have somebody laying in the street who needs, both mental health services and substance abuse services, sometimes EMS will show up and they'll be like, they don't really need us because it's not an emergency in that way, right? But they could use that mental health / substance abuse worker that's going to take them to a program, that's going to take them to a recovery bed, that's going to take them. We need that kind of service like today. Second, if I'm forced to as mayor, if we do not recover Rule 400, and I'm forced to as mayor, what we're going to end up having to do is create a new BPD unit, right? That actually does the work of what BHA security used to do or Boston Public Health Security used to do, right? We'd have to create a whole new BPD unit that actually is doing what those folks used to do, and then maybe hire those people back, right? Is the only way I can see us answering this question, because 400 allowed us to do something outside of BPD. Now the only thing we have would be BPD as a city, and we would have to create, in the same way that we created a cadet unit, we'd have to work with the police to create a different unit that'd be more like some of the security officers that we see out there.
All right, so it's coming up on the hour, and I know that there's one burning question that we want to ask. What makes you different than all the other mayoral candidates? And, what are we looking for to differentiate you from all the other people that are running for mayor?
First I'll start with my lived experience as someone born and raised in Roxbury. Having when I walk Mass and Cass, I know folks, right? When I could talk to you about all the people that I've lost during the years to drugs, to violence. I could talk about my own experiences in that space. As a Black man, I bring the urgency around, I think, some of the risks that we face and that I face personally. I think the other piece is my executive management skills. I have both executive management skills at a community level, working with community to implement community plans, and as a city official, working in a city bureaucracy, which is special on its own, to make sure that we can get change. None of the candidates have that. We're talking about candidates with legislative experience. I bring executive experience. I've got a track record of doing these things. I've got a track record of building transitional supportive housing for homeless. I'm not just saying it, done it. I've got a track record of building deep affordable home ownership. I've got a track record of helping businesses, of creating jobs, of creating job programs, of creating everything from a greenhouse to urban farming land. These are things that I've done. I've used eminent domain as a tool. I've used 121A organization as a tool to create the largest urban land trust in the country. These are things that I've done. None of the candidates can talk about using those tools and building these things out. They can just talk about creating ordinances and laws and having somebody else doing it. I've done it. I can tell you how we do it. I can get it done. I can hit the ground running today as we face these urgent issues. I don't need time to catch up. I know how to do it, and I can get it done.
Y'all heard that? So I just want to say that I appreciate that you have someone on your team like Joshua, who is a Black man helping another Black man running his campaign. So I salute that. But I don't know. Anybody has one last question? I know Domingos is hitting me up. Like, talk to him about the needle exchange. Domingos, unmute yourself. You wanna ask a question? I think it was around the needle exchange program.
Hey, you're doing a great job facilitating, so you can go ahead and keep doing what you're doing. Great job tonight, sis.
Thank you. So I guess that there's a question around the use of the needle exchange program. And I see, there's a lot of commenting on the social media that are people trying to like figure out the metrics about this conversation, because, we're saying that there are beds, then some people are saying that there are not enough beds. Then we have all these services, but we don't have enough of these services.
Yep.
Like, how are we kind of checking the metrics of all this, like how effective it is to have social workers and that, in that space, because, I'll be honest with you, I get concerned about that. And as a person who's worked for the Department of Children and Families, just even when I worked for the domestic violence unit in Park Street, it was scary for me to go into people's homes.
Yeah.
Especially those that they had a significant other who was a violent offender, I guess I would say. And I don't think that that's appropriate language, but that's what I'm using, guys. So I apologize, because, language is a big thing. But how are we kind of measuring those metrics on having those like 24-hour support? Who's protecting the social workers and who's protecting the outreach workers that are going to be out there when individuals are on meth, who are not coherent enough to be engaged, right? So, I like just looking at all of these, I think that that's like a huge question. And also, I know the needle exchange program that does not ask people for ID. So we're passing out packs of needles, but no one's asking for ID. So we don't even know who we're giving needles to, where they're from, since, we need to know where people come from. And as you mentioned, sorry, this is like an overloaded question, but as you mentioned, there are groups that have been established to find missing people. It shouldn't be this hard for families to look for their loved ones on mass and cast if we even had a 1-800 number through the city of Boston to put like, a missing persons report, not for like someone who's missing, but someone who is, navigating addiction and homelessness. How can families reconnect with their loved ones if we're not even getting, collecting information when people pick up needles for the harm reduction conversation? So I think there's like a metrics question. How are we going to measure all of this?
Yeah, there's a metrics question, there's a communications and information sharing question here. And look, let me just, at least from my perspective, collecting information on who's out there, what they need, it shouldn't be done as a barrier to services, right? This is not like, oh, you didn't tell me your name, I'm not going to help you, right? That's not what this is for, but it is so that we understand who we're serving, whether they get the services they need, and then what else we need out there, right? So when you talk about the needle exchange program, we need to do that. But the other thing that I would do on the needle exchange program is I would begin to talk to the community health centers and make them part of this conversation, right? So that when people need assistance, that they're going into a medical facility and they're having a conversation with a medical professional, right? And so in those health centers, you got to give your information. They know how to hold that information with all the HIPAA laws and everything. We can train professionals to hold information for the sake of helping the folks who are looking for services, right? Not to be a barrier, not to share information in the way that we shouldn't share information, but that means we need to have a coordinated system that has these sort of processes in place, and so that we know that when John needs a needle, A, what he's trying to shoot up, B, what kind of program he might be connected to or not connected to for him to get help, and whether somebody else should be approaching him for help, right? But all of that needs to be part of a continuum of care, and not just the one silo here, another silo there, somebody's doing this over here. And so I agree with you. We don't know what the metrics are because there is no collective metrics. Every program I know has their own metrics because I've talked to them, right? We've got X beds, we get Y number of people in, they stay for this long, we do this, we do that. But what's the whole metrics about the number of people who are on the streets? How many people we've helped in the last week, in the last month? How many people have been staying on the streets? How many people we've gotten off the streets? I mean, those are the kind of metrics we need, so we know what's working, what's not working, and what we need, and what we have more than we need. There might be some things we have more than we need, right? And so I think you're absolutely right. We need an inventory, but that's not just an inventory of beds. It's also an inventory of effectiveness, of who's getting it done, and it's being effective out there, and how do we do more of that, and how we do maybe less of something else.
Mm, okay, I like that. It makes sense. I mean, because we can't do nothing if we don't have the right data.
Right.
So, Domingos, you have your hand raised. Go ahead, end us off, D.
Yeah. Uh, hey, John. Good to see you. Happy Independence Day.
Hey, what's up, D?
As a fellow Cape Verdean, what I want to ask is, what are we going to do about the young people in our schools about making sure that we keep them off that path of substance use? We used to have a DARE program that comes into our buildings and educate children, to educate our PPS students on, say no to drugs. We've moved away from that. We've moved away from that over 15 years. And, we have schools like the Mason, Orchard Gardens, and Madison Park, the Blackstone. I mean, there's a good 15 schools within a walking distance from Mass and Cass. So what would you do as a mayor to make sure that we educate our children in our school system so they don't go down the wrong path of substance use?
Yeah, Domingos, that's the right question. And I'll tell you, as a father of four, whenever we pass by and I make it a case, I talk about the complexity of people's lives, right? So I've got one son. If I pull out $1, he's like, "But Dad, you're helping him buy drugs." I got another son who then argues with him and says, "Hey, but look, man, who's gonna give him the dollar? How you know he's not gonna buy a sandwich?" And so in our car, there's a little bit of a battle, right? But that's the kind of conversation you want our young people to have. What happens to people like that? They could be you. They could be me. I could end up in the street by having something happen, like I lose a job and then I get sick at the same time, right? I lose a job, get sick at the same time. My wife leaves me. That's it. Wraps. I'm on the streets, right? And so, I wanted them to look at these people and know that they're our neighbors, that they're our families and friends. B, to begin to think about how we help, right? And then how we help every day as people, and then how can we do better to help? I've always argued, Domingo, as a school committee member, that we need more civics in our classroom. This is about healthcare, but it's also about civics. It's also about society and what happens in society and what our role is as people in society to be helpful to our neighbors. And we need to be teaching this because this is real time, real life. It doesn't get better than this for our young people than to be able to grapple with the fact that there is a man or a woman who might even have a sign saying, "I've got babies at home trying to feed." What do you do, right? And so for me, this is a learning moment. As mayor, I would encourage and push that BPS has a curriculum. Talk to the school committee to build out a curriculum. We're talking about a civics curriculum that allows people to engage in this conversation, that hopefully gets them armed to make better decisions, right? But it's tough, right? Stay off of drugs is one. But we're talking about homelessness, we're talking about being ready to have jobs and keep your jobs. We're talking about mental health and taking care of yourself and not putting too much on your own. I mean, there's so much. This is layered, right? And drugs is one, but there's a whole bunch of things that get people in the position where they need a lot more help. And we've got to make sure that the civics class is really going through the complexity of that. And then also talking about how we help every day and what we do.
Dope. Anybody else has a question? I know it's 8:35, so it's on the hour. If anyone doesn't have another question, and John, if you don't, if you have a little bit of time, let us know. But if no one does, I just want to say thank you. This was a really easy flow going conversation. We appreciate your time, and we wish you the best luck on your campaign trail. And again, huge shout out for having a Black man behind the scenes support you. So I don't know, guys, but thank you guys. Thank you, John and Joshua, for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
To hear back from you guys in the future.
Yeah, let me just say thank you to you for pushing, right? For pushing the issue and making sure this is a conversation, for making sure that candidates are having these conversations. That's the most important thing here. And look, I know in 2013, there were a lot of groups pushing on issues. This is an issue we got to push on beyond the election, right? We got to stay on this one together because these are some complex questions, right? And together we can try to figure it out in a different way, right? And so as mayor, I'm hoping to engage with you guys. Frankly, we need to just engage anyways. I plan on winning, but we need to engage anyways and keep this conversation live to make sure that we, have the right system in Boston and we can save lives. Because this is about people that we know and care about. It brought me to tears to see some folks on the streets that, frankly, this one guy I went to school with, and he saw me and he went the other way, and I felt guilty a little bit because here I am walking the streets and I'm running for mayor, and here he is walking the streets, thinking about his next meal or his next fix, and that's just not right. That's just not right. And it's probably a quick one or two things that has him there and has me here. We got to make it that less people are in that scenario. And for me, that's why I'm here running for mayor. So thanks for the conversation. Thanks for your push. Looking forward to continue to work with you.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night, y'all.
Good night.
Thank you. Have a good night. Stay safe.
Good night.